This is my AI software development lifecycle, and it's how I applied the 5 admission gates concept so that really bad code stopped hitting my review and stopped wasting my time. I built this because I thought that more review would actually make me faster and actually write better code. It turned out it didn't. The real problem was that my agents were actually writing code faster than I can actually review, leading to an overall reduction in quality and actually more time for me to push out features. So once I found that out, I built this into my engineering runtime, and now I get a lot more time back because I'm actually not reviewing stuff that should have never gotten to me in the first place. So here's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm actually going to show you how I applied the review gates. I'm going to walk you through this, and I'm going to leave you with another example where I did the same thing for a workflow in legal. And here's the thing. I do not want you to copy my workflow. I don't want to copy what I do, but I do want you to take away the mindset of what I use to actually land to the point of actually creating my review gates, so you can actually do the same thing for whatever that your workflow is. So gate 1 is actually about ownership, right? It is every piece of work in the system, right? In my system actually starts with a PRD. And if you look at the top of the PRD, what you'll notice here is that I have a name, I have a date, right? It's pretty much who kind of made the decision. So again, this maps with one of the 5 pillars and one of the 5 gates that I talked about. Not an agent, not a human. It has my name on it. So I can actually trace back. And in a situation where I'm the only one doing work, that's maybe not important, but I do keep dates in here so I kind of know when I actually make those decisions. But if you're talking in a situation where you have multiple people working on a code base or working on a particular AI workflow, this is like a super important concept. So for me, I put this right here at the top. Right, and it might sound small, it isn't, right? So when something breaks, like 3 weeks from now, guess what? I know the time that I make the decision. I know what I was thinking, kind of like when I made the decision. And again, if you're looking at multiple people in a workflow, you can actually trace it back to actually who actually did the work, right? So gate 2 is going to be the scope, right? So if you can check here, this is where most AI workflows are going to fall apart. AI can actually generate a massive amount of changes in one shot, right? So if you kind of look here, again, in my case, when a story gets created in my system, I actually bound it, right? Every story becomes a bounded work contract, and the contract itself caps the work at what can be done in a few 100,000 tokens. And again, the big thing here is that this came from my experience. This is my workflow. I figured out that, look, the best way from to figure out scope is to bound it by the number of tokens, because I figured out that around 100,000 tokens, 150 tokens, it's where I can actually start reviewing stuff and not actually have sort of like decision fatigue. So in your case, if you're building something out, you want to realize, according to the workflow that you're doing, what is too much work for you to actually review. And then you're going to actually scope down your AI agents when they're doing that particular work, so that you have the ability to review it without any sort of like decision fatigue, right? The next one for me here is evidence, right? So if you look at the test nodes here in the diagram, every one of them is going to have validators actually attached to them. So before any work is allowed to actually reach me, the validators will run a check, right? So again, if you check it out here, the validators will actually run a check. So human review itself, right, is not the first thing in my verification step. It is the most, because that's the most expensive thing for me, right? Every time I'm actually escalating, every time I'm actually reviewing stuff, it's actually the most expensive for me. So I want my AI to actually do as much checks and reviews as possible. So again, think about what that actually means for you in that case, right? In your case, I should say. What does that mean? Like, what does evidence look like? So for me, my validators, when I do a test plan, they're going to return that the test has run, the results from the test, right? For your workflow, what does it mean to actually show evidence that actually something actually ran? So the next thing I actually get is an explanation. So if you look at this real review documentation from my flow, you'll see that everything in here, right, has an explanation as to what's done. So I can actually read that, and I can actually get a good feel as to whether the AI did what I wanted it to do. So that's a really big deal. So in your workflow, what constitutes evidence, right? I kind of alluded to a law firm, some work I've done from a law firm where the paralegals were actually doing some work for the attorneys. Well, the evidence had to be, they had to state they had to make the AI state the statute that it used and all that kind of stuff to kind of go like, okay, cool, there is some evidence that you actually did the work and you did the right steps. All right, the next one is risk. So if you're looking at the same review doc that I'm looking at in terms for explanation, I always look at risk, right? So if you look at the document, you'll notice what's in it, right? Not every line of code is in there. And it's really simple why every line of code is not in there. Not every single line of code represents the same risk in my system, right? There's a lot of important decisions, a lot of important functions when you code that you go like, okay, I want to take a look at it, but you don't necessarily have to look at every line of code, right? Because you understand that if your core functions are done properly, there's a high probability that the rest of the code, the minutia stuff, is actually done properly. So in your workflow, start asking yourself, what is the AI doing that is so core and central that I absolutely need to actually have a more detailed look into it when I do when a human does a review, and which part of it is so trivial, right? Or which part of it is you just expect it to actually work, right? So that's it for me, right? That's kind of like all my 5 gates that I actually use and in my AI SDLC. And again, that's just applying the 5 sort of like review gates principle. And again, it has made me like 5 times faster. It's reduced, obviously, the amount of mistakes that I make because I'm not looking at every single thing. And, right, again, the AI is doing a lot of the testing for me. It's proven before it gets to me. And if something is not at that level yet, it doesn't even get to my QA, right? It's something that triggers a rerun and it will actually fix its situation. And things come to me only when they're really ready. And you can apply that concept to every single AI workflow, right? I talked about legal. You can do it in transportation, you can do it in banking, in fintech, any space that you work in, the concept of using these 5 admission gates are going to help you. Now, to kind of prove that, I want to talk a little bit more about a use case that I had where I worked with a legal firm involved in lemon law, right? And in that case, the paralegals were doing some work before the case was actually sent to the attorneys. So more specifically, in lemon law, you could buy a vehicle, it breaks down all the time, and in a lot of states, if not all the states, allow you to recoup your money. And in some cases like California, you can even get a ton more money for all the discomfort and the stress that you went through. So lemon law is a really big deal. Now the thing is, lemon law changes across every state, different statutes. So it's a very time consuming thing to evaluate a lemon law case. But it is something that is perfect for AI because you can actually train the AI on the different statutes and different things like that, right? So basically, you can, with the aid of AI, you can give 90% of work to a paralegal who can then look at a case with AI, prep it, evaluate it, right? Write some case summaries, and then send it on to an attorney who does the final review. In this case, the attorney here is your expensive expert, and they're the ones who need to be gated, right? They don't need to see every case. Right, so what happens in this case? So what I built out was a AI that actually knew all the statutes, right? It used RAG, right, retrieval augmented generation. When a case came in, right, it was able to look at all the documents, it would compile it, it would review it, it would select what state it was best to actually file the complaint in, and a paralegal actually marshaled, commanded, used that AI, right? And they would work together. So again, from an evidence standpoint and from an ownership standpoint, every time a case came through, before it went on to the attorney, the name of the paralegal who worked on it was actually stamped on it, right? From an evidence standpoint, once the AI and the paralegal had worked for a case and written a summary, it would cite the law, it would cite the statute, it would cite why it believed, for example, the case was ready to go forward. If that didn't happen, it couldn't go forward, right? So you're looking at all those things in this case, right? And from a risk standpoint, we would judge or rank, I should say, or rate every case, right? From a 0 to 100. The ones at 100 was slam dunk, right? In terms of the AI was sure that this was a case that wanted to be moved forward with. And if it actually got lower to 0, it was the AI going like, look, I maybe inferred a few things. In those cases, right, it would get a second review from a more senior paralegal before it went on to the actual attorney. So again, from the concept here, from the 5 gates, which is risk, not everything has to go through the same process. You're seeing that the cases that the AI wasn't too sure about, got escalated to someone else that was a lower per hour cost worker than the attorney themselves, right? So that's that's your risk right here, right? So again, we have what? We have evidence being shown, like what statutes you're actually using. You have explanation, right? Every case summary then has an explanation of why the AI summarized along with the paralegal how it did. We have the risk. Not every case was escalated to a more senior paralegal. We have ownership because the paralegals' names who were involved in that chain are actually on the document, right? So, and then we have scope, and that's the one thing I hadn't talked about in this case yet. In the case of scope, what we would do is that we realize that it could be very overwhelming if an attorney received 100 cases at a time, right? Because at that point in time, because now the AI is helping the paralegal, things are getting processed really fast. So we realized that attorneys were getting a little bit overwhelmed, and that was forcing them to move forward faster because they would see what was in the queue. So we started actually buffering the queue, right? We would only deliver 5 cases at a time to an attorney and would wait until that attorney drains it out, and then we would replace, right, the new cases for review. When we did that, we realized that overall quality actually went up, and then this quality of life, right, for the attorney within this workflow actually went up as well. So here's it, 5 admission gates, and in that case, we helped take a lemon law firm that was doing about 30 to 40 cases every month, and we were able to get them to 150 cases every month without hiring new attorneys, right? They just hired a couple more paralegals, and again, the quality of the cases that would get into the attorney went up, which means that the per hour revenue generated by an attorney went up astronomically, right? So there you are, 5 review gates. I hope that you like it. I hope that you're able to, again, do not just take what I did, not even for the code. Take this and apply it to your situation, right? So that you can come up with with the meaning of the gates for you. But the 5 gates that I leave you with, you can use them in terms of a concept. Just ensure that you apply them in your situation. All right. So thank you for joining me for this video. If you like it, give me a like below. It helps me know what kind of content that I need to actually make. And if you disagree with me or you have some insight on anything that I said, especially if you have insight into a workflow that you're looking at that you might need some help, just drop the comment below. I monitor the comments all the time, and I'm always open to responding and helping someone through applying some of the frameworks that I actually share on this video. So again, thank you for your time, and goodbye.